In 7 years' time, China is predicted by many to become the #1 economy in the world. But now many experts doubt that China will ever overtake the US due to this one event.
Damien, China, Evergrande, default. We've been waiting for that D word for a while, Damien. It comes and it's just like, okay, what next? What next, Damien?
In mid-December, it was announced that Evergrande, China's largest real estate developer, will default. Now, Evergrande is a massive multi-industry conglomerate in China. In the peak of its power, it had over 1,000 real estate projects, with businesses in vehicles, healthcare, football, and tourism companies. But something went terribly wrong. And even though on the surface things might seem fine, Evergrande might be the reason that China never overtakes the US. So how did this all go wrong? Let's rewind all the way to the beginning. Heng the Group, now known as Evergrande, was founded in 1996 by Huya Ka-yan, who was a very savvy and opportunistic business leader. He knew from the very beginning that in order to grow his business quickly, he needed to align Evergrande with the agenda of the Chinese authorities. He founded the group during a time where a mass influx of citizens were moving from rural regions to major cities, which created extensive demand for apartments and homes. Another factor in Evergrande's growth is the 2008 financial crisis. During these volatile times, the government flooded the economy with a 4 trillion stimulus package. This made lending very cheap and easy, allowing Evergrande to scale up the scope and volume of its projects. In 2015, this was said to be the beginning of the end for Evergrande, and there was a greater emphasis on curbing the amount of debt primarily accumulated on spending in infrastructure. Now, America has been in the news lately due to the battle to pass the infrastructure bill. Theoretically, infrastructure projects should be positive. In the short term, roads, bridges and homes get built, which put money in people's pockets and alleviate unemployment. In the long term, these projects also provide value to the economy. The Golden Gate Bridge serves 20 million vehicles a year, and Hoover Dam provides cheap electricity to the West Coast, are some examples of great success stories. But in the case of China, things went terribly wrong. In order to fund these infrastructure projects, governments would typically raise taxes or issue out government bonds. Normally, when a government decides to go ahead with an infrastructure project, it goes onto the government's balance sheet. This is where China differs. China's infrastructure projects are handled by state-affiliated companies and hence do not appear on the government's balance sheet. This led to a massive problem. China's haste to upgrade its infrastructure has led to a substantial build-up of debt in private companies. A big part of the debt problem lies in the Chinese real estate sector, which accounts for about 30% of the country's dollar-denominated bonds. This aggressive cycle of financing homes with debt creates excess houses which are not being purchased and are empty. To curb reckless borrowing, in 2020, Chinese authorities drafted a 3-line metric system for developers if they want to borrow more money. The first criteria is that liabilities to asset ratio has to be less than 70%. The net gearing ratio has to be less than 100%. The cash to short-term debt ratio has to be more than 1x. If developers fail to meet 1, 2 or 3 of these criteria, regulators would then place limits on the extent to which developers such as Evergrande can borrow. And in September 2020, just a couple of months after the system was proposed, Evergrande faced a liquidity scare, with investors unsure whether Evergrande would be able to honour its debt repayment obligations. Evergrande then informed the local government of its financial insecurity, and by leveraging their key position in the real estate sector, they convinced their suppliers to waive their rights to be repaid, thus ensuring that Evergrande would survive in the short term. But just months later, concerns over the company's financial health resurfaced, sending its bond prices to record lows and its credit ratings were repeatedly downgraded. In September 2020, hundreds of home buyers in Guangzhou staged a protest demanding the company immediately restart halted construction work. And protests like this simply put pressure on the Beijing to intervene and avoid further unrest. Chinese regulators then summoned Evergrande leaders and rebuked Evergrande for its debt problems. But things got worse from here. After months of holding out and meeting debt obligations at the last minute, Evergrande finally defaulted in December and finally admitted to the need of debt restructuring, which will be known as one of the largest debt restructurings in history. H&A, the other debt-ridden conglomerate in China, might offer a roadmap for Evergrande. Local governments in Hainan, where H&A was based, essentially took control of the company, sold its assets, paid off its debt, and is still working on the rest. The Gondal government has now sent a team to go in at Evergrande and help manage this crisis. Some people think that the government may ultimately take control of the company.